the digital ecosystem of football, it means many new things. New companies with new ideas, thinking in new ways, devising new methods for us to consume football, to be part of football, to evolve football. Those companies have to prove their methods. Their models show they're financially viable and sustainable, and the existing players need to be aware of this new kid in the playground, whether they're a challenger brand or a tech giant, and maybe react or reevaluate their offering to stay relevant and stay ahead. So what is this digital ecosystem like in Asia? How does it compare to the rest of the world? What is the potential that lies in Asia for brands and properties, and what can this market offer to football and sport globally? There's lots to discuss in this next roundtable. It's entitled The Digital Ecosystem of Asia, so please welcome, moderating this session, Elliot Renton, Senior Director and Head of Asia Pacific at Grabyo, and your speakers, David Hornby, Vice President Sports at Mailman, Danny Fock, Head of Business Development for Asia at Sportradar, Andy Jackson, Vice President Strategy at DAZN Media in Singapore, and Maurizio Barbieri, Head of Sports Partnerships Southeast Asia and Greater China for Twitter. These are your guests, these are your speakers. Please make them welcome. Elliot, the floor is yours.
Cool. Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all refreshed and had a good lunch. As was just said, we've got an awful lot to get through, so I've got the hard job of trying to narrow this down and extract a lot of good information from you guys. So I think, a few takeaways from me over the last day and a half. I think, we're faced with a market that is quite clearly a mobile-first market, and there's a lot of different challenges around that. I heard the term today that data is oil, so we need to address some of that. We've got traditional broadcasters that are moving away from a kind of command and control type of attitude to a more distribute and deliver and partnership. In many respects, we've still got some greenfield opportunity here, and for key platforms and businesses to take the lead. So I think, I'm going to dive straight into it. I'm going to kick off with Mr. Barbieri here on the end at Twitter. In terms of your business, I think, a lot's been said about the big platforms and elsewhere around the world where they're acquiring content, spending vast sums of money on experimenting with premium rights. Quite clearly, that's not your strategy in this region. But I think for the wider audience that might not be familiar with what you've been doing over the last couple of years can you explain a little bit more about the model, how you're deriving value back to those partners you're working with, and what you're what's going to happen over the next year in this space as far as Twitter's concerned?
Well, thanks for the Mr. Barbieri, who's my father and made me feel much older than I am. Thank you guys for joining us. You said something right. Acquiring rights is not something that we see happening, at least for Twitter. Sorry, guys. I know that some of you have expensive rights on their books. Even though we were the first ones to do something like that when 3 years ago acquired the rights for the NFL, right?
Yeah.
But that was something very peculiar. We knew that we were going to recoup that investment. It was non-exclusive and so on and so forth. Twitter is a platform where we want to make sure that people are able to see what's happening in the world, whether it's news, sports, or entertainment. In the situation of sports, of course, we want to have as many partners as possible on the platform, but I don't see us going, like I said, out of our way to acquire rights that they are still on them. It's not like we are broadcasting on Twitter. The publisher has its own handle. And second, if a publisher doesn't want to use Twitter in Southeast Asia, that's their prerogative. I still think that if you are not on social media, whether it's Facebook, Snap, YouTube, or Twitter, you are actually causing a disservice to your audience. I think that we are well positioned, even though we might be smaller than other organizations. I think that we are well positioned. We have worked with Andy in the past. We are going to work also with Mailman in the future. We have a clear way to engage the audience, create more value for the publisher, and most importantly also for the brands. So My job is right to put all these three things together and make sure that all parties are happy.
Sure. I will come back to a couple of those themes you mentioned before. So I'm going to go over to David now. For those of you who may not be fully aware of Mailman in terms of what they've done over the last 10 years, you guys are the gateway for a lot of businesses in the China market. You've helped to drive audience, scale, revenue with over 100 rights holders and brands. You're now venturing into Southeast Asia. So, why now? And what's that going to look like? And really, what's underpinning that? What's the strategy for you guys from a Southeast Asia perspective?
So thank you for having me. We spent 8 years building a China business, which is essentially a vehicle and a platform for international IP to build and grow their businesses in China. This is essentially a fan-first model. It's not a case of, here we are, fantastic, fancy rights holder, now we're in China, everybody come and follow us. You have to understand the fans, you've got to earn their respect, and you only really do that through an authentic connection, which in China is through social media content, is the first line of defense. Then there's a fan funnel as you identify, are these guys following us as passive fun fans, or are they really engaging, and are they eventually going to become somebody or a consumer who we can monetize? So that's been an 8-year journey, and why now? It's really been a demand-led approach as we've become more and more part of the businesses of our clients, whether that's investing into e-com or ticketing or different rights. Many of them are saying China is a key market, but the growth in Thailand or the new emerging data out of Indonesia and India is super important for us. And instead of doing it half-heartedly, they are doing it with us or in partnership with us in many cases. And that's going to be a combination of us putting our best people on the ground in Singapore, moving them over from China, but then hiring the local experts in market who have been working in this space for 10, 15 years. They understand the fans, they know what they're doing, and we can incorporate a sort of Mailman strategy that's been up and running for 8 years with those local fan insights on the ground. And it's new, we've been building it for 9 months, so we'll see how we go.
Sure. We'll come back to some of those themes as well. So for Mr. Jackson, I'll come to now. So,
Hello, mate.
DAZN, where do we start? So again, as many people in the room will know, there's a massive ambition from DAZN. Over the last few months, you've gone through a big reorg of that business. Perform content, it will be moving on in another direction. I want you to paint the picture for the room on what DAZN Media now looks like versus what people might have knew of it before, and what the DAZN Plus element to it now means, and what that means for partners and your customers.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, when I joined, I've been with DAZN just over sort of 8 months now. When I joined just on the cusp of the sort of reorganisation of the business, and that traditionally there'd been 4 units. So there'd been Perform Media, as you know, Perform Content, Goal Studios, which is our sort of agency offering to brands looking to activate around football, and then there was DAZN. And a decision was made around September to consolidate that into 2 business units. Everything consumer-facing was now under the DAZN umbrella, and Perform Content. And obviously, as you say, recently we announced the sale of the Perform Content business. What that means for brands and what we've done with DAZN Plus is we've really created our own ecosystem that sits around the OTT platform. Where DAZN exists in the market that DAZN exists, that helps in 2 ways. One is to amplify with our commercial partners into that ecosystem, and secondly, obviously, in a market where we're live, it's to drive subscriptions back. So within that DAZN Plus framework, and what it is really a framework that's consistent across our business and across markets, but then within that, it allows you for sort of local nuances. So in that is our sort of owned and operated platforms, which is obviously goal.com as the biggest football media destination in the world, digital destination, sporting news, Spox in Germany. We have our social channels. We have our ePlayer network that is rebranding as DAZN Player, which is, reaches 100 million people a month across third-party sites. We then have talent. We've obviously made some significant investments in ambassador partnerships like Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar. We have an influencer network that sits underneath that. So what that is that whole ecosystem works together. As a standalone media business, which it always has been, but also now it works in synergy with the OTT platform in the markets where we're live.
Yeah, and can you just, I'm going to come to Danny in a little while, but while I've got you, can you just talk and wax lyric a little bit about how Japan has gone for you, the challenges that you face in that market, the learnings you'll have, because no doubt you're going to expand, and I'm sure there's future announcements to be made around that, but where has been the success and where has been the challenge around Japan as that one Asia market where you're in right now, from that OTT perspective and the media perspective?
Yeah, I think if we look at our markets, Japan is one of the most mature markets that we're in, as in Japan and Germany launched around the same time. It's probably our most complete rights portfolio. Yeah. For those of you that don't know, we obviously made a significant long-term investment in the J-League and Japanese football. So we have J1, J2, J3. We have pretty much dominant position in European football, so Champions League, La Liga, Serie A, Liga 1, Premier League. We have F1. We have Major League Baseball. We have local baseball, which is obviously very important. We have tennis. So from a breadth of rights, it's probably the biggest market and the truest to that all sports offering. And we have a significant media business that sits around that. So we have goal and sporting news in market. So from a social perspective, we're really servicing 3 channels: goal, sporting news, and DAZN. We have talent that we work with, the likes of Iniesta and Podolski and David Villa, who's come into the market. So it's probably our most integrated and sophisticated market at the moment. It has its challenges. I think we were talking, the other night. You talked to the acquisition team. We've had to look around, how people pay for the service, because it's not a traditionally sort of credit card market. So we've worked with retail and convenience stores around offering gift cards and things like that for people to pay for the service. And obviously we have a major partnership with Docomo as a telco, which has facilitated that. So yeah, we're very happy with it. As I say, with a long-term investment in Japanese football, which has been very fruitful for both parties.
Cool. Danny, you've just joined Sportradar, well, over the last, 2 or 3 months. But you're a veteran of your space, having been at Stats for 10 years. You've obviously just joined. I'd like to understand more about the vision that you have within that your new business now. But also, we've talked a little bit over the last couple of days ourselves on how the Asia market is fundamentally different to Western markets, particularly the US, around the attitude towards data and how data immerses itself within a fan experience. Give us a little bit of thought around what your task is in the region around changing those assumptions, underpinned by the vision that you have within your new role. What does that look like?
Thank you, Elliot. So, guys, thank you for joining the sections. So I'm recently joined Stats. So previously, I'm working more on the data side. So I'm heading now the media portfolio for Stats in Asia, for Sportradar in Asia. So what we see in the market, for example, the Asian market, the digital ecosystem is quite different, from that out of Europe and US. What we see, they got a very strong local social media platform. Like in China, WeChat, over 1 billion people using it. Also, they are very closely tied to the e-commerce. So you can see this totally different environment that we can think about how to make use of the user. Also the database, how to make use of that through sports. That's very important. What I see in the market, also the fans, they have 2 groups of people serving. They love being the EPL, and also maybe they have a local team, the fans. So they got different passion of the things. So like the user daily life, like I'm using Grab here for a taxi. But when you in South Korea using Kakao, okay, you can use that only version. So in China, the same, we're using Didi. So we see there's lots of things right now. Every media owner or league, they're thinking how to make a step forward to interact directly with their user, which means the user database and what their behavior is very critical. So from the global sport data provider perspective, we think in the coming futures there will be lots of things we can use the data to overlay with the live video streaming using in the different social media platform. I see all our products right now in drifting in this direction. We got some AI tools that can easily driven different content that should be suitable for all the social media platforms.
So going deep into personalized experiences where you're enriching the experience through the data sets that you have on those platforms. Okay. I want to go back to David. Talking about your strategy again. Where do brands fit in with you guys? Traditionally, you've been very strong, I think, on leagues and clubs, and that's been your DNA. Where do brands fit in for the region as a whole? You can include China in that, but what is that looking like for you?
So, I mean, China specifically, brands and performance marketing for branded clients has been probably our biggest growth sector.
Right.
When measuring ROI, a football club is either looking at a new deal or is looking at increased broadcasting revenue, or in many cases is looking to satisfy existing partners. That tends to be where we focus a lot, either working with the club on how to drive value for an existing sponsor, or actually direct with the sponsor how to leverage and use their existing rights. So it's kind of introducing this digital sponsorship model, which is you don't necessarily have to pay for LED advertising and old school rights. You may just want to put your efforts, time, resources, and money into creating new IP, creating new content with your partner. So that could be, I mean, a great example is Southampton, not a huge club in China, has traditionally struggled to compete at the same rate. They did an enormous 20-part episode series where they took a bunch of fans and 2 KOLs from Beijing on the Trans-Siberian Express all the way to St. Mary's, backed by one of their sponsors, their betting partner, and that, instead of it just being a social plan or a social campaign that they ran over 6 months, instead it was this one-off massive spike of engagement and viewership. Club was happy, brand paid for it, brand was super happy, and it's something that they could run and replicate. So doing that in China has traditionally worked. In going into Thailand, going into Indonesia, it's often the brand and the new sponsors that are the reason why the clubs are going to that market in the first place. Same with an athlete. So I think our model is initially to build with club, team, or league or organization, but then overlay the branded project work on top of that.
This is a question probably for at least 3 of you, but possibly Danny as well. But I mentioned the fact that data is oil. Well, I think it was Marcus that may have mentioned that earlier on, and somebody else mentioned that as well. In your world, this whole idea of data, owning the data, understanding that audience is absolutely vital. I'd like to hear from sort of all of you on how that's looking like within your business. I mean, we've talked about DAZN Plus before, and you're bringing that in as part of the whole network. What are you doing in that space?
I think data is critical for us in pretty much everything that we do. In that it's data around understanding the fan journey. I think there's 2 parts to this. One is the fan journey. One is the consumer journey. The fan journey is in the lead up to the game. What are they consuming? Who are they communicating with? On what platform? How does that feed into their consumption of the live sporting event, be that football, be that F1, whatever? What's the analytics that then comes out of that? And what do they do afterwards, just as importantly? So that's the sort of fan journey, and our job is to, from a DAZN media perspective, is to connect brands to that complete journey in a credible and authentic way, where they're not hijacking it, they're actually contributing to it and are seen as part of that journey rather than someone trying to distract. And then obviously from a consumer journey, we use data at the heart of all of our decision making around rights, what we look for, what we will look at, but also how people are using the platform, what they're watching, how they watch, what product innovation they want. So we've introduced a number of product initiatives in the last few months, in terms of multi-view, downloads, allowing people to download content to then watch on the go, where in markets where sort of data charges are high and streaming might not be possible. So data really sits at the heart of absolutely everything that we do on every side of the business.
Yeah. David?
We had a good chat last night on transparency of data, and everything he's just said is true. we are organizations that make so many decisions based off data. Traditionally in China, this is a market where you have all heard the stat, like enormous figures coming out of different media platforms, but understanding those numbers is incredibly difficult. Viewing figures from broadcasters is often released late, and then even then it's released with limited detail. So we've had to build our own platform, plugging into the APIs of Weibo and WeChat to start understanding data, and even that is a fraction of what we soon to hope to have in Southeast Asia. So in partnering with guys like Twitter and Line, we now have access to data that is just not the case in China. So we're looking forwards to now having a slightly better decision-making ability in new markets.
Well, at the end of the day, sports is expensive for the broadcasters, for the clubs, for everyone that is involved in this industry, right? Prices are going up. And maybe media rights are a little bit plateauing, with the exception of the United States, but commercial rights are becoming more and more expensive. So you want to make sure that you are getting a good return on the investment. In our case, because we do feel like Twitter is where whatever is happening in the world is unfolding in real time. We're actually trying, sometimes we don't succeed all the time, but we are trying to make sure that we understand, to end this point, what is the journey of our users, so that in case for certain brands they can become also customers, right? We have brands that they sync their TV ads with the ads that are going to be displayed on Twitter, because the moment a commercial goes up and you cut, you immediately pull out your phone or your tablet if you are not already doing it, and you know, the brands that have spent millions of dollars for that commercial, for that airtime slot, at least they have the chance to capture the attention of that user, even if it is on another platform. I think that we are getting better at doing this. I think that it's, you know, for us, Southeast Asia is a market that is growing. One thing that we might be smaller than other regions, but we are actually growing at a much faster pace compared to more mature markets. And we saw the great successes that we had in terms of, like I said, engagement with certain events that we did in the past. Most importantly, the one you know, happened last year, where Italy didn't take part in it because they decided to go on a holiday, so the World Cup. And we noticed amount of people, how much longer they spent time on Twitter, because everybody was talking about it. Even in the Philippines, which is a market that is not extremely football crazy, people were talking about the World Cup even more than the actual NBA Finals. With one exception, when LeBron James signed for the Lakers, everybody went crazy, and then they went back at talking about Neymar and Ronaldo and so on and so forth. So this is the kind of data point that we can bring back to the brands and say, if you want to be relevant, if you want to be right in the middle of things, probably you might want to look at us.
Great. And just on that point, I mean, you're not always, you're sharing data, but not sharing the right data to some of those partners. You're working with one championship, you've been working with Astro. What are the biggest challenges for you to, you know, in terms of what those partners are looking for the value from Twitter? You're providing the engagement, you're providing the scale, but what are the challenges that some of those partners are giving you?
Yeah, I mean, one championship is actually one of the greatest. Sounds like I'm bragging, but bear with me. Is a good example of how we turn actually quite a hostile partner towards Twitter. At the beginning, they were like, "You guys are so small that we don't even want to talk to you," and instead, they started investing in us. We returned the favor by supporting them with tech support, marketing support, and so on and so forth. And we are actually looking at how to extend this partnership even further. The thing is that sometimes, we need to be able to tell the right story to the brands. So one championship is a rocket ship, but sometimes the message gets confused, and brands might see only people beating each other in the face. It's not only that. It's a great story about honor, respect, sacrifice, sweat and tears. And we noticed that it's not only an Asian phenomenon, it's or sport phenomenon. It's actually a cultural phenomenon that goes beyond Asia. Last time that they had an event in Japan, one championship was trending globally. It was #1 in the US, #1 in Japan, top 5 in Singapore, #1 in Tokyo. They were top 5 in all the major cities. But these are the good things for the brands, that we can go back and say, look, these guys are really cool. They are doing great things, and look at the kind of engagement, because then you see all the comments that are coming in real time, and it's like, this is great. I didn't even know that it existed. What's going on? How come DJ is fighting for this organization? It's not easy. Twitter is a very tough platform to crack because it needs to be nurtured. Because you need to say something interesting, otherwise the world will move on. But we are collecting all these good examples that we can take back to the partners, and they can use this data for their own sponsors, so that Twitter becomes additional inventory for them. And we can use this data also for our own sponsors, so that we can go back to our brands and say, hey, this is part of the portfolio of content that we have, and you should be on that.
Okay. Danny, going back to you. Go ahead.
From a B2B perspective, we see the social media platform, that have been growing quickly. People would really want to have data for the users. So we definitely see our core competency would be speed, accuracy, the depth and width of data point. So right now we have different official partner, and then having this relationship, we got very advanced data point. I see the opportunities, but I also see the challenge. Like we're starting with basketball and with NBA, because those are very data-driven sports, as well as an MLB, we're the official partner with them. So we're building different products based on the tons of number of data points. The thing we got at the team here, make sure this is related to the users. It's not only for coaching, but more like to drive user engagement for that. So I see this very good direction we're going with. And then for Asia, we see a little bit challenge will be the way that they consume the data. It's not exactly like US sports, but we see the good trend right now, like the 2014 World Cup. Before that, people don't take care about the statistics, just enjoy the formation or the strategy, the tactics they have. But after that, they're more adapted to using the data point. I see that's a very huge potential for us to build more in-depth for that. And also from the sponsorship perspective, do you see this increase? Like 2018 World Cup, there's around 39% of those sponsors are from Asia. So we see the trend is growing. So we are already on a very good foundation to building this kind of product to fit in. We can work direct with the B2C platform, social media platform, or driving the sponsorship opportunities together.
Yeah, I think as well, it's up to us as the content producers to decide what we want from the platforms. There are three real components. There's the content, there's the audience, and there's the content delivery mechanism, which 30 years ago, when I first started in media, was print, broadcast, or radio. And whilst everything has changed, a lot hasn't. It's about what's my content, how scarce is it, how valuable is it valuable enough for somebody to pay for it, or is the model that it's going to be ad funded because it's common, and then you choose your distribution platform. Twitter on its own is not a strategy. Facebook isn't a strategy. It's about what content am I producing, and which platform is right for delivering that content to the consumer. And it will be different, and it will be a mix depending on what your objectives are, whether you're a football club or a league or a federation, whether it's sponsors, content. Yeah, it will totally depend. And so I think we can talk about ecosystems and platforms, but sometimes I think we're in danger of making a platform decision before we've made a strategic decision about what we're trying to achieve.
To add a fourth point to that, on the platform decision, we're now, as both content producers and consumers, spoilt for choice. There's both in China and in Southeast Asia, there's pretty significant fragmentation of digital media platforms. It's no longer just Facebook and Twitter in Asia. It's no longer just Weibo and WeChat in China. So there is no point as an IP or a content producer putting the same content on, kind of just mass spreading it across all of those platforms. You've got to be very targeted, which is a fair point. It is a platform strategy. It's not a Facebook or a Weibo strategy. You will put a piece of content on Weibo if it fulfills the objective of the consumers on there. And that may not be what it used to be a year ago. WeChat, most people can consider a social media platform, whereas it's a full-blown lifestyle ecosystem. Like I pay my rent on WeChat. It's a CRM platform and it's a CMS platform for brands. Same in Southeast Asia. You have TikTok growth, Instagram slowly and surely growing, Line going into new markets, Twitter looking at different strategies to grow. So you have to be very targeted and do not necessarily put a different piece of content on every single platform. It's a smart choice sometimes not being on a platform if you don't think you're going to succeed. So that's a very important fourth point to the Andy trio.
Speaking of TikTok, we've got about 8 minutes left. I want your view. TikTok, ByteDance, they're investing a lot internationally, having some challenge in some markets, but that platform is becoming more and more relevant for sports properties. I've seen a lot of clubs spending a lot of time investing on that platform. How do you see it internationally shaping up, or certainly from a outside of Asia, China perspective, versus something like an Instagram? Where do you see that going? Where do you see some of those China players, particularly TikTok?
As China players go, I think ByteDance, the parent company, is the one to watch. Like, they have 5 very strong media platforms in China, Douyin being the TikTok equivalent, Jina Toutiao being a very, very strong content, sort of tag headline content platform. They're growing incredibly fast in China. They're starting to invest into rights. They've done deals with the NBA that are very, very strong short-form video content deals focused on Douyin. So I see TikTok going the exact same route, maybe at a slightly slower pace, but presenting brands with a different option for vertical screen short-form video content, which, if used correctly, has that very sort of Tinder-like swipe functionality of being able to just consume as much slightly randomized content as possible in a sports capacity.
So go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I think the TikTok things give us very strong the impression, sport is a part of entertainment. So we try to integrate with different elements. Like NBA, they're not doing the Get Live game or the highlight. They're more like the mascot showing in the video. So you see they're attracting different targeted market. They're not joining the sports, but they would just want to have more lifestyle things sharing. I think that's a pretty good point we need to think about how we make use of different social media platforms.
Yeah. I think, it's not, what we're seeing now with social platforms as well, this whole new ecosystem that we're in, the disruption, we're seeing the social media platforms, Twitter aside from the Asia region perspective, trying to invest. UK, Amazon are spending money. What do you guys make, for all of you, what do you make of the recent news that Facebook have pulled out of that Premier League deal, just from a rights perspective? That's based and underpinned on, I think, some of the fragmentation that we're definitely seeing in the market, how they can monetize that content, how they can deliver that content. Do you think that's going to be reflective of how things move forward? Or do you see other platforms like Amazon and Facebook having another go at it in this region, or even the China platforms coming to that region having a go at sports rights, if you sort of look to the future? What's your general view on that?
Well, rights fees have been so inflated that the media companies are starting to look at literally how on earth are we going to build ROI from this investment. Typically, the Chinese players have come in and put an amount of money down that does not make sense. And I think they're starting to realize that the current business model, ad revenue alone is certainly not enough to cover it. And the paid subscription model is not growing as fast as they expected. So they're going to have to find a new business model or just an additional business revenue stream if they're going to continue to invest into the same level as right. Facebook probably got worried.
Hence the DAZN strategy. It's more of a hybrid potentially moving forward, right? So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for Facebook, but you know, I think you need to have your monetization strategy behind your rights deals, and as you say, that's either a subscription model or an advertising model, or as we said in our case, we're about to welcome brands onto DAZN, onto the OTT platform. We've had trials running in Germany and in Italy that have been successful. There's been almost no feedback from users. I think because sport has completely natural breaks. So you're not interrupting a film or Game of Thrones to serve an ad, and also I think a sports audience is conditioned to have commercial messaging around their sport. It almost signposts when the game's about to start or when half time's coming to an end, and so we've adopted a hybrid model, and say we'll be rolling out our sort of broadcast packages in the next few weeks for next season.
Maurizio, your view on rights and your friends at Facebook?
No, I can't. Like Andy said, I cannot speak for other entities. I think that we all want the best content on our platforms. That's it. I mean, we know that talking about sports in specific, we want to make sure that we have it or we have some of it. We know that it drives conversation, it drives engagement, it's sought after by sponsors and advertisers. I think that we unlike 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where a bad investment could have been offset by other line in your budget, now you really have to make sure that whatever you're spending is going to be well spent, and you are able to get some money back. We are going to see hopefully more partnerships. I mean, I cannot speak for Facebook, but if I wouldn't mind having a partnership with an entity, with a broadcaster that says, look, I'm going to put this on Twitter, this on Facebook, this on WeChat, this online, and so on and so forth. And then it's up to us to find the resources to monetize that content. Whether there's a minimum guarantee, whether it's only revenue sharing, and so on and so forth, probably the market will dictate that. I find it difficult to accept to say, oh, if you want that content, you have to give me this regardless. Well, give me a couple of years to understand whether the market is interested at that price, and then maybe that becomes the floor for future deals. But, we are entering a new 3-year deal for English Premier League, right? So that usually becomes the benchmark of how all the other deals perform and how the industry reacts to that. So let's see what happens. So far, I think that, with you guys entering the market and providing additional choices to the users, which is a good thing, not a bad thing, but also providing new inventory for brands, new ways to activate what they want to do around those sponsorship. It's going to be good. It's just a matter of understanding what is the value now and what the value will be in 3 years' time.
Maybe it's a call out to some of those rights holders saying, like, what are you doing around just the traditional live? Yep. What are you doing around the match? Like, where's the shoulder content? What additional value is somebody paying a lot of money going to get? China specifically, it's at the moment up to the clubs to create additional product. Guys like Chelsea doing their own studio shows to support a match package that is already going out on a different platform.
Using Grabyo?
Possibly one day. So if it's the Premier League in this case, what are they doing outside of just the traditional 90 minutes to make a broadcaster happy, give them something they can sell, something that a brand's going to be interested in, maybe more in the lifestyle sector. I mean, sport's a very small part of a massive entertainment industry. It's about time they start looking at what is being produced in and around the 90 minutes.
Sure. Look, I think we've had quite a broad subject to cover. We've got about a minute left. I've got one more important question, but I think we've covered some really good ground here and tried to narrow it down to your businesses and some of the key themes. We're on a Champions League 48 hours ahead. There's a beer in it for you if you give me the right answer. Who's going to win the Champions League, Maurizio? Who's going to win the whole thing?
Liverpool.
The whole thing.
So it's an easy answer, but just...
Ajax.
Right. Andy?
Liverpool.
No.
That's one beer I've got to buy. Danny?
I don't want to follow you, but I also have a Liverpool.
Liverpool.
Okay, I'm out of pocket.
Ooh.
That's tough for a Villa fan to say, but yeah.
That now means they're not going to win it. But anyway, on that fun note, it's been great talking to all of you. I hope that's given you all some perspective on what these businesses are doing in the region. I'm sure they're open for more questions and a tap on the shoulder. Been really happy to speak to you today. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Terima kasih.